What's up, guys? D-Rock1992 here. For this next video, for my next About video, I am going to be talking about one of my favorite bands. They would be very close to my top 10, I have to say. Definitely. I would, I'm going to be coming up with a top 10 bands list. They might be on the list, they might not be on the list. I have to configure the list, definitely. But regardless, love them or hate them, this band has had a lot of success. And the band I'm talking about is Creed. They're currently on hiatus right now. They have been on hiatus since 2012. But in the late 90s, early 2000s, this band was one of the most commercially successful bands of all time. Of the most commercially successful band of that era, of the period they were in. Excuse me. They've had a lot of success. There's no doubt about it. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. So the original bandmates, the original guys that were in the band were, two of them actually you may know by name. Scott Stapp, the lead singer. Scott Stapp, the lead singer. Mark Tremonti, who is the lead guitar, and he does vocals as well for the band, or he did vocals as well. Brian Marshall, bass guitar. He was for most of the Creed's history. He was with the band, and Scott Phillips, who's been with the band his entire career. They actually have had a pretty good. They've only had a couple other members of the band in particular, but they started out with Scott Stapp on lead vocals, Mark Tremonti on guitar, Brian Marshall on bass guitar, and Scott Phillips on drums, percussion, and keyboards. And they started off in 1993. They formed in 1993. Became a band. 4 years later, they released their first studio album, which is My Own Prison. And My Own Prison comes out, it's one of the best debut albums ever. In American history, at least, in U.S. history. My Own Prison, it hits 22 on the U.S. Billboard 200, but eventually it gets to 6 times platinum. Over 6 million copies sold. And it's just a big success. Some highlights of that album: My Own Prison. It's definitely a very good song. What's This Life For? A very good song. One of their more popular songs. Torn is another popular song from them. And I believe I just named all their singles. Those were their 4 singles that came out. And with the power of those 4 singles, they had so much success with that first album, My Own Prison. A couple of years later, they come out with 1999's Human Clay, and it's an even bigger success. It hits number 1 on the Billboard 200, and it goes 11 times platinum, which means it went diamond. It was a diamond album for the band. Human Clay, another big successful album. 4 singles released off it. Higher, which is a popular Creed track. What If is a popular one. With Arms Wide Open, another very popular Creed track. And Are You Ready? Maybe not as well known as the other big singles, but nevertheless, just a big nevertheless, just a big success for Creed. I mean, what they definitely are they're a Christian rock band, kind of. They have Christian values and ideals, that are rampant, that are present in their music. But I mean, they definitely, either way, late 90s, they had success with My Own Prison and Human Clay. Now, as they entered the 2000s, they came out with Weathered in 2001, another big success. It went number 1 at the Billboard 200 again, and it went 6 times platinum. So not as successful as Human Clay, but still a pretty good success. They had 6 singles from this album. My Sacrifice, which is probably their signature song, I would argue. It's one of the first rock songs I think I ever heard. You know, one of the first ones. When I started getting into rock and roll music, my mom actually had the Creed Greatest Hits album, and My Sacrifice was on it. And I used to listen to it all the time. It was one of my favorite songs to listen to. Bullets was the second single that was released. One Last Breath, Hide, Don't Stop Dancing, Weathered. Weathered, another popular song for Creed. Again, another big success. There was a little change in the band. That the guy, Brian Marshall, the bass guitarist, he departed from the band. And Mark Tremonti, he filled in. As I mentioned before, Brian Marshall was bass guitar. They just had Mark Tremonti fill in at bass guitar, as well as be the lead guitarist. So, yeah, definitely, those 3 albums were big. And then the band went on hiatus in 2004 because of disagreements, primarily between Scott Stapp and Mark Tremonti. They all went their separate ways. Mark Tremonti formed Alter Bridge, which I've heard some of their songs. It's a pretty good band, definitely. Not like Creed, but a good rock band nonetheless. Scott Stapp ran into a lot of alcohol and drug problems. I saw this performance that he gave. He was on this MTV show, and he was visibly drunk. He was visibly drunk, stoned, whatever, out of his mind, basically. And everybody knew it, pretty much. And unfortunately, he went through a big crisis in his life. But, not to be deterred, Creed eventually did get back together. Eventually did start getting back together. I mean, they never broke up. They actually, my mistake, they actually did break up in 2004. They reformed in 2009, and that very same year, they came out with the album Full Circle, which is an appropriate title because they came full circle. I mean, a lot of success with the first 3 albums, then a disbandment, and then coming back to the band. Anyway, Full Circle is a pretty good success. It hit number 2 on the Billboard 200, and it didn't get a gold certification, but it's still, it wasn't nearly as successful as the first 3 Creed albums, but it's a pretty good album. The 3 singles on it are 3 of my favorite Creed songs: Overcome, Rain, and 1,000 Faces. Those 3 singles right there made up the album. And, just a big success. And then the band went on hiatus. They didn't disband again, but they went on hiatus in 2012. And a lot of the guys now have gone on to do their own thing. Most notably Mark Tremonti, he is with Alter Bridge, I believe. I think he is. Let's see if I can try to look that up. I think he was anyway. But anyway, now I'll kind of talk about the singles and how they did, and I'm going to base it on Billboard Hot 100. the U.S. Billboard Hot 100, they had a #1 single with Arms Wide Open, which is their only #1 single on that Billboard chart. My Sacrifice hit #4. One Last Breath hit #6. Higher hit #7. So those were their only top 10 singles. In the mainstream rock, there's a U.S. mainstream rock chart. They actually had 4 #1 hits. What's This Life For, a popular Creed song, Higher, With Arms Wide Open, and My Sacrifice. So they definitely hit a lot of success there. U.S. alternative rock, Higher hit #1, a couple #2 singles in One and With Arms Wide Open, and My Sacrifice as well. So having said all that, I just don't understand, and it's much like Nickelback. I'm going to do a video in the future on Nickelback. I just don't understand. I don't really understand why Creed is a hated band. They've always gotten a bad reputation. You know, a lot of people hate them. A lot of people love them, but a lot of people hate them as well. I think the primary reason is because they're so good. They're so good, people just hate them. People want to find a negative about this band, and they want to hate on them. That's not fair. It's unfounded. You know, judge them by their music. A lot of people, I think, do say, too, that their music just isn't that deep, I guess, and soulful, stuff like that, but I find that their music is very good. I'm a big fan of Creed, and, you know, you can hate the band all you want, you know, to all the haters out there, you know, you can hate this band, it's your own decision, but you're missing out on a great band. Definitely. You're missing out on good post-grunge, hard rock, rock and roll, basically. You really are. But one other thing to mention real quick, there were also a couple of, well, actually I don't really need to mention them, but yeah, what's good about the band too is that their 4 original members, for the most part, they stayed. Brian Marshall left the third after Weathered. Or during Weathered, you know, he wasn't on the Weathered album, but for the most part, Phillips, Tremonti, and Stapp have stuck with Creed throughout the history of Creed. They've been with the band. They didn't quit the band at all. So now, I mean, I really hope, and I'm really pulling for Creed. I hope they get back together. They're doing all the members of the band are out there doing solo projects right now. Hopefully, I really hope that they can get back together in the near future and get back together and collaborate on a 5th studio album. I really hope so, because actually they were planning on a 5th studio album and it was being made, but the plans were scrapped. Because, I think disagreements within the band. Tremonti and Stapp, you know, they had fought before in the past, and probably disagreements between them and all the other band members. But, either way, here's to hoping that Creed is going to get back together in the near future and do another studio album. I really hope so. And that is it for my Creed video. D-Rock 1992 out.